Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful, amazing people. You're looking absolutely wonderful, I must add. Absolutely wonderful. And what else is wonderful today? Not much, because it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm doing videos because I've got a day of it ahead of me. So that's got to be worth a like and subscribe. If not, it's not very kind. But anyway, let's get straight into the meat and potatoes, as we've got alternate perpetrator to talk about. There's been some docs dropped in the last few hours reference the Idaho 4 case. I covered in video 1 that the trial has been moved, but not a continuance, just moved about 7 days while they do a more, I don't know, a strong voir dire process, hoping to get some people who haven't been affected by the pre-trial publicity. They're obviously going to get people off the moon. But anyway, let's talk about this. So, redacted order on defendant's offer of proof, re alternate perpetrators. We're not going to read this entire doc because some of it's boring as fuck. But what we are going to do, we're going to get down to, let's get down to business. Oh yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to come down here and it says, here, look, here the defendant has offered purporting to establish the 4 individuals. So there's 4, we've always said, multiple perpetrator theory, and there has also been multiple stories with respect of a group of people, the running people in the Banfield. Who are we talking about exactly as the 4 individuals? But it says alternative perpetrators objectively fails to meet the Meister standard. So that's a standard whereby they can say, look, these people, you need to look at it. Stop everything. Look, check this out. Stop everything. They're not going to be stopping everything. They're going to be carrying on looking at it, which you'll find out in a second. Look, entirely irrelevant. Nothing links these individuals to the homicides or otherwise gives rise to a reasonable inference that they committed the crime. Indeed, it would take nothing short of rank speculation by the jury to make such a finding. 3 of these individuals were each socially connected to one or more of the victims, interacted with one or more of the victims at social events in the hours prior to the homicide. And this is just a footnote. I'm not reading that. What's this bit? This is another about, yeah. We don't want that. So they've redacted a load of stuff. That's what we need to be seeing, isn't it? Redaction. Lived within walking distance of the crime scene and were familiar with the layout of the victim's home from prior social events. While perhaps his evidence could suggest an opportunity to commit the crime, which no doubt is an opportunity shared by dozens of others in the victim's social circles, there is no compelling evidence that any of them had a motive to kill the victims, much less physically harm them. So where is the compelling evidence that Bryan Kohberger had a motive to kill the victims? Are we saying that there is a motive for him to kill the victims? Because you've got to ask that question, haven't you? If you're saying that, well, we can't possibly look at these because there's no compelling evidence that any of them had a motive to kill the victims, I'll just turn around and say, well, what's the compelling evidence that my client had to want to kill the victims then, much less physically harm them? Or means to do so. Means to do so? Well, we've seen multiple pictures of people around this campus with K-bar knives and massive great knives cutting lemons and melons. Melons, not lemons. Further, there is no evidence connecting them to the crime scene. They have each cooperated with law enforcement, providing DNA samples, fingerprints, and allowing searches as requested. Notably, lab testing has excluded their DNA from samples taken from the crime scene and victims. The 4th individual did not know the victims, but had a passing connection to one of them while noticing her shopping at a store approximately 5 weeks prior to the homicides. He followed her briefly out of the exit of the store while considering approaching her to talk. He turned away before even speaking to her. So this is going to be I think this is going to be potentially the Stalken theory, part of the Stalken, considering approaching her to talk. Yeah, look, followed her briefly out of the exit of the store. This is going to be with respect of Kaylee Gonsalves, I believe. That's who this is going to be about here. The event was captured on surveillance camera. This individual subsequently cooperated with law enforcement, providing his phone number and a DNA sample. As with the other alleged alternative perpetrators, lab reports excluded his DNA from the samples taken from the crime scene and victims, and there is no evidence connecting him to the crime scene. So it's all going to be guys, all guys. Look, the fact these individuals live within walking distance to the crime is not probative evidence, given that the perpetrator drove a vehicle to the crime scene. Well, that's fucking ridiculous, because we don't. That's just saying. Well, we now know that the killer drove a car. How the fuck do you know that the killer drove the car? If you're saying the killer's Bryan Kohberger, for instance, I suppose the argument would be, if this wasn't, say this wasn't Bryan Kohberger's car, or say it was Bryan Kohberger's car, but he had not done this crime, he could come forward, he could have come forward earlier and said, that is not my car, and stop fucking passing her over everything and showing it as a killer's car because it's mine, and it ain't. So I suppose what they're trying to say is, well, no one's come forward and said, but this is where the pictures being made up of multiple cars, and possibly this car being green, for instance, would indicate a car that's in the area. So yeah, it's one of them where I don't think that can be ruled out, but we'll stick a pin in it. Further, none of these individuals drove a vehicle matching the description of the suspected killers. But again, it'd be interesting to know what cars they drove, because if it was like a green Hyundai Elantra, for instance, that would be mental. Or if it was a pickup truck or a Chrysler 300, I don't know, or a Sonata, BMW X5. Collectively, defendants profit. Oh, that was funny, because there was speculation over a BMW X5. Can't remember who said it. It might have been Eddie who said it. And lo and behold, there is a new to them, Kaylee Gonsalves' sister, I believe, has got a BMW X5. I digress. Collectively, defendants' proffer with regards to these four individuals fails to give rise to even an inference that they committed the crimes, or otherwise make it more or less likely that the defendant was the perpetrator, therefore is irrelevant under IRE 401. Defendant has provided no probative, admissible, significant evidence of motive, ill feelings, means, presence at the scene, or any other connection to the crime that could possibly move the ball to the extent it supports an alternative perpetrator theory. At best, defendants' offer of proof can only rise to wild speculation that it is possibly one of these four individuals could have committed the crimes, which is inadequate under Moister. Again, mere inferences that another person could have committed the crime will most likely not be relevant. In other words, it's not sufficient for a defendant to merely offer up unsupported speculation that another person may have committed the crime, which is all defendant has done here. Even if there was a shred of probative value in the proffered evidence beyond wild speculation, it is excluded by IRE 403 as the 10th circuit Freudian slip, noted regarding alternative perpetrator evidence. It's not sufficient for a defendant merely to offer up unsupported speculation that another person may have done the crime. So what they're basically saying is Bryan Kohberger can be in there and go, oh look, it wasn't me, Jack Showalter, he did it. Without having proper probative evidence, you know what I mean? You can't do that. You can't just say, oh, Jack, he did it. That other Jack. Such speculative blaming intensifies the grave risk of jury confusion. This is funny as fuck. So listen here. So such speculative blaming intensifies the grave risk of jury confusion, and it invites the jury to render its findings based on emotion or prejudice. See the problem there? Anyone else see the glaring problem? So they're basically saying, look, yeah, Don't need to postpone the trial, mate. Don't need to postpone it because we got these things set in place that will make sure that don't happen. It's not going to happen. The juries know what they're doing. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. And then in this, it's like basically saying, oh, you got to laugh. Such speculative blaming intensifies the grave risk of jury confusion, and it invites the jury to render its findings based on emotion and prejudice. Based on emotion and prejudice. There you go. Likewise, here, presentation of the proffered alternative perpetrator evidence would pose a great threat of confusing the issues because it would force the state to defend against a nebulous allegation. So it's basically saying, no, you can't say that Bryan Kohberger didn't do it. You can't say that. Don't say that. Don't anybody say that. It's just him, right? Just him. Because if you dare say that someone else might have done it, they might have to consider that. And we don't want them to consider that anybody else could have possibly done this crime. We've got our man, and there is nothing that we're going to allow to happen to take the eyes off this guy. And they are well aware of how prejudice and everything can affect the jury, and they've just said it in this doc. So Bryan Kohberger, I think it's safe to say, is fucked. Bryan Kohberger's fucked, mate. Absolutely fucked. He's not going to get a fair trial. They absolutely know he's not going to get a fair trial. They know that the publicity that we're seeing is going to affect his ability to get a fair trial, and they ain't interested. They want this guy dead. That's as simple as that. I just hope that this trial absolutely proves beyond a reasonable doubt that he did it and offers proper, tangible evidence. If it does, fuck him. He deserves what he gets. But if they don't, and that's like I said yesterday about mudslinging, and he is convicted on what seemingly is going to be circumstantial evidence garnered by mudslinging and riding a wave of just negativity caused by leaks, breaks of rules in terms of the non-dissemination order, and something's gone seriously wrong here. And again, it's like I said yesterday, that should scare people. This either works properly or it works shady. Love you all, and I will catch you all tomorrow.